to this One Book, One Lincoln presentation. I'm Diane Gonzalez. The book all of Lincoln is reading and discussing this year is Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End. The book is by Atul Gawande, a practicing surgeon. This is the 15th year for the One Book, One Lincoln program, sponsored by Lincoln City Libraries. And it's a pleasure to introduce my guests today. David Smith is the chair of the selection committee. Welcome back for this discussion. Katie Murtha is a librarian and the coordinator of the One Book, One Lincoln program. And Dr. Bob Ronner is the director of the Partnership for a Healthy Lincoln. Thank you all very much for being with us today. And for those who have not yet finished the One Book, One Lincoln book or the finalists, don't worry, we won't spoil anything for you today. We'll try to behave ourselves. Let's talk a little bit about the process, David. There were 210 nominations received for 151 different titles. It doesn't seem like the popularity of this program has waned any in the 15 years.
Not a bit. And we're very excited when there's that many nominations that take place along the way.
How did those get narrowed down to the final three and then the final one?
First thing that happens is that the library takes a look at the list of books, because one of our requirements is that the books come in multiple formats, so that they can be digital, they can be audio. They're looking for paper and hardbound copies and availability of those. And so then after the library has looked at that, we receive a list as a committee. And then the committee just jumps right in to talk about all the books that are there at our first meeting. And books that people have read, we can get some comments on. Sometimes we're able to eliminate some books right away, either because they're not, we think they may not be the sort of book that the community will respond positively to. But we don't eliminate very many in that first go round. And then we just I assign books to the committee members, and so we'll read anywhere from 5 to 10 books at a time, and we just keep eliminating through the course of about 6 or 7 weeks along the way, trying to cut that list in half each time till we get to our top 10. Sometimes 11, sometimes 9, depends how that goes. And then at our final meeting, we make sure that everyone has read every one of those books. We go through a voting process to determine the top 3, and then finally the one book.
It sounds very democratic. How many people are on this committee?
This year we had 18 active participants.
So a large group from the community.
A good number of people. So we're getting a lot of varied feedback, and this, I think, has been one of the most diverse groups of committee members that we've had. We've had much younger members on our group this time, and much more balanced gender-wise and diversity-wise.
We want to talk again about the 3 books. The Being Mortal is the One Book, One Lincoln selection for this year. But we're also going to talk today about the 2 finalists, and those are The Fisherman by Chigozie Obiama. He is an assistant professor at UNL, so there's a local connection there. And then Bettyville by George Hodgman. And I've asked each of them to pick a book. And we're going to start with Dr. Ronner, Being Mortal. As a physician, we've selected you to discuss this book and tell us what it's about.
Well, it's basically Atul Gawande himself is a physician. He talks actually about his own father in his declining years, whose father is actually a physician originally from India. And he talks about all the things that come up while he's trying to work with his father's diagnosis of a tumor, and how he goes into hospice and things like that, and realize that unfortunately in medical schools we're often not taught as physicians how to deal with dying in a good manner. And so he kind of goes through the different things that he's learned, and then talks about what's changing in our society that's making this such an issue lately.
And this is a nonfiction book. What made it rise to the top, David?
It was one of those books that every time someone read it, they had positive response to it. And actually it was an interesting positive response, because there was always a little bit of hesitancy, because it does talk of end-of-life decisions, and there was some wonder if younger people might be as interested in the book as the people on the committee were. But across the board, everybody felt like it was an important book for people to read of all ages, and whether or not they had parents that were making these decisions, whether you were at that age where you were having to make some of these decisions yourself. It was just very informative, and the amount of story that goes on throughout the whole of the book really drew our committee members into it.
Was it an interesting book for you to work on in terms of developing community programming and discussion groups?
Absolutely. We reached out to the medical community, and everybody who I contacted was very supportive. So we were able to have physicians that are going to come and be a part of our community conversations. So those are dialogues. Anybody from the community can come in, and we're talking about the book. But we've even had people come to the community conversations that haven't even read the book, and they can still jump in because it's all, the subject hits everybody, no matter who you are, and everybody has something to contribute. And a lot of people are sharing their experiences and kind of learning from each other. And I think that's really an important thing. And then we also have a program on hospice, and that's discussed in the book as well. And there's a lot of misconceptions about what hospice is and what it provides. And so I think that's going to be an opportunity for people to come to that program and learn a little bit more about what it is and how it can benefit them or their families, or somebody that's going through a really difficult end of their life.
That's something we all have to go through eventually. And Dr. Ronner, as a physician, how did this book personally affect you?
Well, actually, the timing was great because actually there's a group of physicians working on trying to figure out how to come up with some documents and things to educate people about end-of-life issues, because we run into so many issues around this where people have just not had this conversation before. I think there's a lot of kind of collective denial about the fact that we're all going to die someday, and so people just don't like to face the issue. And if you don't deal with some things ahead of time, the end can go very badly. And so by doing that, you'll find out that a lot of hospice physicians became hospice physicians because they've seen it go wrong so often. They wanted to find a better way, and that's why they've been so much pushing this book amongst the community to get people to at least have those conversations. Because when you have those conversations ahead of time, it's so much better 1, 2, 10 years down the road when the time actually comes.
And one of the points he makes in his book is maintaining quality of life until the end.
Yeah.
Is there some practical kind of advice in this book for all of us?
Yeah, well, being clear about what it is that you actually want, because we have this denial, we just say we want more stuff. Well, what more? There comes a point where you probably don't want everything, actually. And unless you face that, you'll say something and you'll realize that, well, everything may be actually the worst thing you could have. So what he talks about, what is your real goal? And a lot of people, they want independence. They want to have conversations. They want some meaning toward the end of their life. It's not just more technology and tests and tubes and things like that. They really want quality time toward the end. And the change in the focus from quantity to quality is what most people need to get through, and just understand what that really means.
And Dr. Gawande was featured in a PBS Frontline episode, and people can access that at the city website. I want to make sure people know that all the information about the One Book, One Lincoln program, as well as the winning book and the finalists, it's available at lincolnlibraries.org. And again, that Frontline interview with Dr. Gawande is featured as part of on that website. Well, let's go on to talk about some of the other books. David, I'm going to have you talk about Bettyville because it also deals with in a fictional way, a related issue.
And actually, it's not that it's not fiction. It's actually nonfiction.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's actually about George Hodgman and his mother. And we'd classify it as memoir, probably.
Okay.
So we'd talk about it. Hodgman worked in New York City as a copy editor and in the publishing business, and he returns home. The story, or his story, takes place when he returns home for his mother's 91st birthday, and he discovers how much her health has declined in being gone, and he ends up staying to both help her through some of the decisions she has to make and to help her there at the house. And so it does tie in really nicely with being mortal along the way. But the other interesting element about the story, it also has to do with small town life. It's in Missouri. It has to do with Hodgman being gay and never really coming to terms with it, and some contention between his mother and himself. And as much, I think, because how like his mother he is, and how that's good at times, and as we've all known in our own families, sometimes being that much alike is uneasy. And so it's really a story about family and about human relationships along the way, and lots of humor that's laced through it as well. And for our avid One Book, One Lincoln readers, we know that humor isn't often something that finds its way into our book selections.
Well, I've not read the book, but I understand the characters themselves. Of course, they're based on real people, so they're quite memorable.
They are, incredibly so. His mother especially is, you might describe her as a character in that sense of having a very interesting personality, very dynamic, very opinionated, and yet we also see that those elements that are starting to fall away as her memory, she begins to lose her memory, and harder for her to make and do the things that she's been used to doing through her whole life, that independence.
Well, and the son who is used to the big city life of New York is suddenly back in the small town, and the town probably has its own certain character as well.
It certainly does, and it's as much about his trying to fit back into or come to terms with what small town is like compared to what his life in the city had been.
Now, The Fisherman is a book written by, as we said, by Chigozie Obioma. He is an assistant professor at UNL. Tell us about this book, which is actually based in Africa.
Yes. So it's a story basically of a family, and the father has to move away for his job, and he doesn't want to bring the family with him because where he's going is very dangerous. And so the mother is left with the children. It's basically a story of kind of the family kind of disintegrating a bit. There's 4 brothers that are, they go to this river that in Africa at one time it was considered, you know, like a god, and as Africa had been colonized, the river becomes more and more polluted, and it becomes a place where people don't really want to go. And along the way, these 4 brothers meet. They call him a madman, but he delivers a prophecy that the oldest brother will be killed by one of his other brothers. And so it's kind of a story of, you see the whole family kind of move along, and they go along, it just kind of, you know, they have all this conflict, and they really disintegrate, and it's really an interesting book. I think he's a beautiful writer. His descriptions are phenomenal. Of just, you know, when he describes the river, you can smell it. You know, you kind of see what it would look like. He has some really interesting characters in the book, and then you have all this conflict between kind of African folklore and kind of the Western Christianity that comes in, and how there's all this conflict here, and it's a really interesting read. I really enjoyed it, especially the second time I read it. I think I really got a lot more out of it. So there's a lot to go back and look at, and he has chapters where he kind of tells you, he gives a little bit of a description of what each character is like, and so you kind of get an idea, like this is an older person kind of giving you an idea of what happened, and then he goes back in time, and then he writes as the child because he's the youngest of the 4, and so he's kind of trying to come to terms with what happened. I think he's 9, I think, when the book kind of really takes place, and then he's writing as like a 30-something-year-old looking back on it. So it's a fascinating read. I know I really enjoyed it. A lot of people on the committee really enjoyed it, and he's also going to come and do an author visit for us.
That's right. We should mention September 18th, Bennett Martin Public Library, and the information again is on the website.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be great for people to have a chance to meet him. Have you met him?
No, not yet. I've just emailed, corresponded with him through email. But we're really excited. We haven't had an author visit since I think the first One Book, One Lincoln, and it's hard for us to get authors on the timetable that we have. And so we're very fortunate that he's here in Lincoln and is willing to make the time for us.
Now, this is his first published novel, but it's getting a lot of acclaim. He's won some awards.
I don't remember all the awards. I know he was shortlisted for the Man Booker. He won an NAACP award, I believe. Yes, it's gotten a lot of awards, and I mean, it is beautifully written. I think anybody who really appreciates the English language, and you go through everything that's important, alliteration and allusions, and I mean, it's just such a well-written book, and it's really kind of fascinating too. I think we've had 2 books back to back now that are last year was written by a Nigerian author as well. So it's kind of interesting too to see a little bit of the parallels there.
I think one of the things that the committee was excited about was the diversity that was in these three books, because we have both fiction and nonfiction, and that the stories, although connected in some ways, work together, but are also very different one from the other, and trying to reach as many different kinds of readers of Lincoln as possible.
Dr. Rondo, did you have an opportunity to read the other two books as well?
No.
You've probably read all three.
Oh, yeah,
correct?
we were on the committee
Both, yeah.
together,
So-
so we read, but when we're reading them so quickly, you don't really get a good feel for them. So I went
Right.
back and reread all three of them.
So what made these three stand out to you? David?
They're all very well written, but very well written in different sort of ways that I think. We think a lot about, when we're choosing the books, about what the community may be interested in, but also ways that we can push the community to do some thinking, sort of beyond what we may normally either experience or know about. And I think all three of these books do that, but not to a degree that would offend, turn off anybody along the way, but just would lead to really good discussion in a group, because it brings up new ideas, new insights, different perspectives.
I understand that that has happened with Being Mortal, that one discussion group, in fact, they were closing the building, and that's the only reason that the discussion had to end. Have you been involved in many of the discussions?
I'm at one of the upcoming one. We have 5 different discussions, and we've had community physicians that are going to be at these, many of them with some end-of-life background. So Dr. Bob Bleicher was at that meeting, and pretty well attended. He's a hospice physician. The next one was Dr. Kyle Hafley, who is the medical director at Tabitha. He's a family physician but teaches geriatrics at the residency program. George Hansen, who's a community family physician, is at another one, and I'm going to be at one of the upcoming ones. So
Which one will you be at?
I can't remember, actually.
Anderson.
So I'll be one
Anderson?
Bennett on August. No, I'll be at the one at
Anderson,
Anderson on August 23rd. So.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the programs, Katie. There's community discussions, special programs planned. We mentioned the author visit with Chigozie Obioma is September 18th at Bennett Martin. It's a program September 25th on hospice care at Gear Branch Library. And then the community conversations are running all the way through August?
Through August. There should be one every week starting the 10th, and Tabitha is actually hosting the one on August 10th, and that's going to be a panel discussion. So that's going to be at Tabitha. And I know there's, I think, at least 6 physicians that are going to be on the panel. And then the other ones are going to be in our libraries. The ones that we still have left are at Isley, Anderson, and Bennett Martin.
And again, you can find out all the information about the One Book, One Lincoln programming at the library website, lincolnlibraries.org. You'll also find resources for book groups. In fact, the library will even provide a leader for your discussion group. You can sign up for Facebook, Twitter, email alerts. There's discussion questions, blogging, podcasts, resources. We mentioned the Frontline piece with Atul Gawande. Information on related topics, and then these books, as they mentioned, are available in a lot of different formats: hardback, paperback, book on CD, book club in a bag, ebook. So there's no excuse not to read all 3 of these, as well as the 10 finalists. Those are all listed on the website as well. So lots of good reading ahead for many people in Lincoln. Let's remind everyone again what the goal of the program is. David?
Well, the goal is really to engage the community in a common read, bring people together that may or may not regularly meet, and to be able to do some thinking about topics that we may not normally think about.
And as you mentioned, this with being mortal, it's a topic that all of us are going to have to face. So what are you looking forward to in terms of the discussion that you're going to lead?
Well, we're really happy in the medical community, because we actually were talking about doing something like this. I had actually done a book discussion at my own church, and it went great, and that's just fit in with us really well. I think it's just something the community needs to have more conversations about. And if it's done well, it can prevent a lot of problems. We were talking earlier about how if people don't deal with this ahead of time, it can lead to a lot of bad family outcomes at the end. A lot of death can be and dying can be a very stressful time, and sometimes a lot of family dysfunction can come out. And if these things are handled better, so much of that can be prevented. And just the quality of life in the end doesn't have to be as bad as it is. And so we just really want people to understand the things that are involved and what they're really asking for, and to have a better understanding of how it should go toward the end.
And looking forward to next year, the 16th year, when do you start the process, Katie?
I think usually we close the nominations for the year. The nominations are open year-round, so we'll take suggestions year-round, and you can go to our website to do that. But we close for the year in January, and that's when our technical services area puts together the books, and they look at what can be bought, because that really does filter out a lot of books if we can get it in multiple formats. And then we started reading in February. So we read February and March, and by April we're usually done as a committee for the selection part, and then we start working on programming.
And Katie, if folks are interested in being part of that selection panel, should they contact you at the library?
Yes, please do, because we have about 4 people I think that are rotating out. So we are looking for people, and you just have to be a reader. There's nothing nothing really beyond that you need to, and you have to be available and ready to read, because it is a lot in a short amount of time.
But they're quality books, as you mentioned, very well written. So, well, I want to thank the panel today, David, Katie, Bob. We want to encourage everyone to read the One Book, One Lincoln for this year, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, as well as the 2 finalists, The Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma and Bettyville by George Hodgman. I'm Diane Gonzalez, and thank you for joining us for this One Book, One Lincoln program.